Hello and many thanks for joining us on the program today. People, Politics and Power. I am Imonia Marere. A few weeks back, Nigerian women from all walks of life were upbeat, and some of them even took to the streets to protest the rejection by the National Assembly of 3 constitution alteration bills seeking to reserve 35% of seats of the national and state legislative assemblies for women and for reserved quotas for women in public appointments and political party administration, amongst others. This week, however, some respite came the way of the women as a federal high court in Abuja ordered the federal government to implement its existing 35% affirmative action policy on public service positions. The court ruling arose from a suit filed by some women groups challenging what they described as the marginalization of women by the government. They argued that the 2006 National Gender Policy approved by government specified that 35% of public offices be reserved for women. Now, the presiding judge, in agreeing with his position, held that lopsided appointments by the federal government were unlawful and violated the national gender policy, as well as the provisions of sections 42, 147 subsection 3, and 14 subsection 3 of the 1999 Constitution as amended, and Articles 2 and 13, subsections 2 and 3 of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights.
Agreed with us that over the years, the Nigerian state has been violating the right of women as pertains to participation in governance. That subsequent or several governments over the years has been marginalizing women in their own country, and the court condemned this act and held that the right of the Nigerian women to freedom from discrimination must be recognized and enforced by all authorities and persons in Nigeria.
For us, it is victory, and for the government, we know that they will acknowledge this and do the needful in terms of ensuring that we have a balanced system of governance that will bring about fast development for the country and that would address all other issues affecting the country.
This landmark court ruling, which tends to be another step in the struggles of Nigerian women in their demand for more inclusion in governance and policy making, forms the kernel of our conversation on the program today. How significant is this ruling? How far can it go in the women's quest for a bigger voice in the process of nation building? Will government respect this ruling? Is it even actionable? Is it justiciable, given that it is a product of what you may describe as a mere policy and not a constitutional mandate? What further steps can and should the women take to actualize their aspirations and desires to be effectively represented at the table with their male counterparts? Join us in our conversation on this issue right after now. Well, I'm joined in the studio now by 2 women activists. Yes, that's what they are. Cynthia Bamalu is the Director of Programs at Yaga Africa. Thank you so much for finding the time to join us.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Also joining us is Ene Obi. Ene Obi is the Country Director, Action Aid Nigeria. A familiar face, of course, that you may have seen also on the streets as the women agitated for greater rights in the Constitution. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, sir.
So let me begin with you. How significant do you consider the ruling by the court earlier this week?
I think I'm really excited it's a celebration for us because that is landmark for women in Nigeria in the history of our country that we're having such a judgment. And the judgment is coming amidst the fact that when we were looking at strategies, how else can we commit ourselves? The Nigerian government, you know, looked at, went into Beijing, which is the Beijing platform, 1995, which they committed to 30%. And then the Nigerian government came back and also put in their own policy, you know, national gender policy, 35%. And we are seeing and working with them and seeing that this representation is not really coming into bear in terms of activity and implementation. So civil society organizations came together across board to say, look at what is going on here. How more can we tell the government? Is it the political will? Is it the personal will of the leadership, you know, of the country? Even the commitment of the president to 40% in 2018 to say, if I come back in 2019, I'm going to get 40%. That's still not coming. So how else can we do it? And this is some of the genesis that led to the going to court to say this is what we can do. So we are excited and we celebrate, and it's to say that there are so many things we're doing at the same time. You know, going to the National Assembly and then the gender bills that went off-road is like, you say the Constitution of Nigeria is telling us there is no discrimination, but in reality, what we see on ground is different. You know, and we look at that's why we're looking at the National Assembly to say that this is what we want is a human parliament, not male parliament, not women parliament, but human parliament that take cognizance of the population. The 50%, are they standing on one leg? In terms of decision making, they're standing on one leg. Because there is no way that in the House of Representatives that you have 360 and only 13 are women. And then in the Senate where you have 109 and only 8 are women. It means that the several committees that you have, women are not represented. So we are celebrating and we really commend the court ruling. And this is justice for social justice.
Cynthia, do you think that this court ruling addresses any of the issues that were rejected at the National Assembly, the gender bills at the National Assembly?
Yes, so if you look at the content of the ruling, in fact, one of the decisions of the court was that the failure of government to achieve 35% affirmative action when it comes to appointment into political offices, so appointive offices, at ministerial level, Federal Executive Council, that was a violation of the Constitution and in fact a violation of their commitment in the National Gender Policy. Now, one of the gender bills basically seeks to amend the sections on appointment of ministers at the federal and commissioners at the state level to guarantee 35%. Although the Senate had reduced theirs to 10% and the House 20%, but both bills still fail, even with the reduction of, and we were saying, what is 10%, what is 20%, right? So there's one of the bills actually is on that appointive offices, which is one of the major decision of the courts now, is basically saying that the Nigerian government has made commitments in the national gender policy to achieve 35% for affirmative action when it comes to women representation in public offices, and that the Nigerian government is bound by its commitments within the gender policy, one. But it goes beyond the gender policy. It looks at key sections in the Constitution, sections 14.3. So if you look at the sections 14 in the Constitution, the introductory paragraph talks about that Nigeria is set up as a democratic system that respects the principles of democracy and social justice. Then in 14.3, it talks about how government will be composed. And there's a clear statement that says there will not be a predominance of a section of the group of the society in government. And then this sections 14.3 is supposed to guide appointments of ministers in sections 147. So if you see the court's judgment, those were the key sections in the Constitution that were relied on. The other parts were our commitment into international treaties, so be it the African Charter or Human and People's Rights that clearly says there wouldn't be discrimination of anyone based on sex. That is one of the grounds. And then the section that says that there will be equal access of citizens to public service. There is a clarity on the emphasis on equal access. And then our commitment under the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, or be it the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, on the or the Covenant on Social and Economic Rights. So the court relied on our commitment to all these important instruments that we signed on to as a country, our commitment to the constitutions, sections 14, sections 42, actually, fundamental human rights to freedom from discrimination based on the grounds of sex, and then sections 147 when it comes to appointments, and then our national policy. And I think it's important what this landmark court decision has done for us is, one, this is Nigerian women testing our laws. Usually we don't go to court to challenge governmental decisions that are in breach to commitments to policies or even the constitutional mandate. But Nigerian women took the initiative to go and make this challenge. And it's important to recognize leadership of the Nigerian Women Trust Fund and other other organizations that were part of that move. And even the Falana and Falana chambers, because it was also, it was also important that we had a law chambers that felt the importance of these decisions and took up this case and made it a personal decision to go to court. So from 2019, it's a long journey. This journey did not just begin this week, right? From 2019, the conversation has started to where we are today. And finally, with several adjournments, we finally got the decision here. And I think the judge was quite, not just progressive, but this is what you call judicial activism and respect of the ethos of democracy. Because if you listen to Justice Okorowa's decisions, and just to commend the justice for this important decision, is the fact that in his decision, he looked at the importance of enforcing policies, and he expounded on what he called the doctrine of legitimate expectation, which in his conversation he said that when government commits to a policy, it cannot selectively apply it or decide not to apply, that doing so would amount to abusing or violating the rules of natural justice because they are bound by their commitments. And then he said that Nigeria is a democratically constituted or composed state, and because of that, excluding women would amount to violating the principles of democracy, which promotes a people-driven government, and people includes women. So I think for me, this is landmark, and it is an important conversation at this very worrying period where the National Assembly is still dilly-dallying on issues of gender and the rights of women in the Constitution, when that is actually the right step to take at this stage of our democracy.
Now, but let me bring you back to the gender policy, the 2006 gender policy.
Yeah.
Some have argued that it's only a policy. It doesn't have the full weight of law behind it. Yeah. And so that's probably why government has chosen to obey it or disobey it at will, implement it or not implement it at any point in time.
Yeah, I think there are several commitments. You know, the decision to even bring about the Ministry of Women Affairs, you know, was something that started from the formation of the Women Commission. And that is taken up from the fact that the government realized the downward trend, the lack of representation of women. And also because they go to the world meetings, they go to the UN meetings and they are challenged. And so the Ministry for Women Affairs was formed shortly before the Beijing conference. And I remember the, you know, Ambassador Atta, you know, the first minister, who came on board. And at that point, the activism was that we need to get women representation. There's so many things that have come a long way. And so the trajectory of having the policy is to bring it out more, to highlight things for people. Because if you already have, from the judgment you are looking at, you already have the issue of non-discrimination. And that was one of the challenges that we were receiving going to the National Assembly and talking about the bills. They say, why do you want people to create special seats? Why do women need special seats? We said, if you don't create a special seat, how do you bring the issue of the gender balance in your decision-making, in the process of your decision-making? And so they say it's a policy, but the policy is bringing to life some of the agreements that the government has talked about, what they have committed to. The African Charter on Human and People's Rights was a commitment of the Nigerian government. The Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women was another commitment of the Nigerian government, which they have sought to domesticate. They are still suffering till today, after so many years. And so the affirmative action, which came from Belgium, it was also a commitment of Nigeria. Hundreds of women were sponsored to, and the government leaders were sponsored to Beijing in 1995. And I'm lucky to have attended as a young woman at that time. But it was a commitment. And the reason why civil society organizations will go to such conferences, I want to see my government there. Did they commit to it so that when they come home, we can hold them responsible? So it's a part of that responsibility. So we are excited that they went on to bring the policy. Policy is not a policy sake. That's why it goes to the council. The commitment of everyone is to come down and say, we have a policy, we must indulge it. So what are the blockades? What have been the challenges of government not achieving these percentages? Because we shouldn't even be looking at percentage in the modern world now. You should be looking at 50-50. Is a population, is your constituency that we're talking about. People with disability, many of them are not included even in the policy making. How can you say you can take decisions that can affect a people when you don't know how it feels? If we have the kind of percentages of people in decision today and women are dying in the maternity, at the maternity death road, the way they are dying in Nigeria, we are among the last 5 in the world, from the bottom in the whole world in terms of maternal mortality and child mortality as well. So what is responsible for that? We are saying only women who go to maternity ward can tell you how painful, how it is to go to the maternity hospital and not being attended to. And the child is coming and you have nothing to do. You can't explain it better than a woman. And that's why we are saying that we have to have women representation. So the policies are there, but Nigeria, we have attitude in terms of the laws now. And that is why we sought for this explanation or the judicial pronouncement or interpretation of the Constitution in terms of what it does to women. If you say there is no discrimination, then why? Take the Federal Character Commission, I always point out, was created because the government of Nigeria wanted to look and be sure that in your recruitment of the public servants, you don't concentrate on one section of the country. And it's the same should go for the women in Nigeria. And so I think the excitement is that this has come, but we won't go far unless implementation is taken seriously. And I think the Nigerian government need to take this seriously.
And talking about going far, Cynthia, yes. One would have thought that maybe over the years, the national gender policy came into being since 2006. Between that time and now, was it not possible for this policy to have been pushed as a bill and made into an act of the National Assembly so that it becomes much more binding than it is now, a mere policy that people can wave aside?
Well, first point is what the judge has done is to say that policies are not just mere policies, which is why he interpreted what is the doctrine of legitimate expectation within the administrative law field, which governs the works of government and its agencies. So what it has said now is it is a policy and you are bound by it, and it has given it a legal backing. The second on why not acts of legislation? Actually, the Gender and Equal Opportunities Bill is would be a landmark legislation that basically encompasses what you have in the policy and beyond. Because beyond just domesticating the CEDAW, it also looks at our context and how it adversely affects gender issues and seeks to achieve some sense of equality and balance and even equity. So that is that act of legislation, which is why there's been a lot of push for the JO bill. It's been delayed and it has failed in previous assemblies. It was brought back and it was stepped down in December 2021, if you remember. So it's still before the Senate. The Senate said they would go and reconsider it. The major challenge there was with the title, right? So perhaps if the National Assembly, as it is as an institution, was a serious institution, that would have been one priority legislation for this administration. However, let us also remember that one major challenge when it comes to gender issues is the fact that within the composition of the National Assembly, women are still a minority, which is where the challenge is, which is why the interpretation of the court is important, because it looked at what is equality. The Constitution talks about equality, freedom, and justice. And if equality means both sexes, that the fact that we do not have both sexes means the system in itself is acting in breach of the constitutional commitment, which expounds the principles of equality. And that if non-discrimination intends that everyone, male or female, should be represented, and that women are not represented, it means we are also violating the right to freedom from discrimination. So the main challenge now is, because we've not had reasonable number of women, when it comes to legislations on gender, if you follow the trend, it takes a long time to pass issues on gender. The Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act, if you remember the journey, 10 years it took. And what was it basically trying to do? To incorporate sections which were also part of the policy that talks about gender-based violence, because you know the national policy is a framework, gender policy. It looks at 12 major domains, be it education, be it health, be it employment and economic opportunity, be it power and political decisions. There is a broad framework that has several legislations seeks to address. However, what we've had is the deal of hostility at the part of the legislature. So it took forever for VAP to be passed, but finally we got it after the name was changed to Violence Against Person. The Gender Equal Opportunities Bill is one landmark, intended landmark legislation, because it's still a bill, that when we have that passed, it also addresses a lot of these issues. So that is that. And then the other part is these gender bills. Yes, women went out to protest, right?
Yes.
And the gender
before
bills,
you come to that,
yeah,
the gender equality bill that has been there and has been put on hold since December 2021.
Yeah.
Now, when you look at that bill and you look at the gender bills that were shut down just a month or so ago, are you still very confident that the gender equality, equal opportunities bill will somehow scale through this National Assembly? Given the timeline, the time they have left.
Well, you know, we work in a system that is really hostile to women, which is sad. So women have to fight 3-4 times as hard to achieve any major thing, be it in any sphere. So while we are worried that the delay may mean not achieving the passage of this GO bill in the 9th Assembly, we're still hopeful, because the fact that we're going into election doesn't mean that lawmakers should abandon their constitutional mandates of lawmaking.
But that's what they do.
That's what they do, sadly. But it's also about how we engage, which is why, if you see, when earlier the conversation had been that women were exploring every possible avenue within legal mandates. So be it going to court for the court to interpret what these constitution provisions mean and what the gender policy, the legal basis of this gender policy, or even going through legislation. We're exploring every means, and the advocacy would continue. Whatever we don't achieve now, we can still achieve next year. However, what this decision has made is, with the next government, you cannot, with this decision, make appointments that breaches the 35% affirmative action. Because what you'll be doing is acting outside the law. So what it does basically is to mandate that for composition of government, you will have 35% affirmative action in government. However, for the GO bill, I actually believe that the National Assembly has a constitutional mandate to pass this law, not just because it addresses issues of women, because if you look at the bill, for those who have had time to read the bill, it addresses issues that affect men and women, in the sense that it creates a society where tomorrow the boy child will not be subject to any form of discrimination. So it expounds on the rights of women, men, girls, and boys to create a gender equal society, a society where women and men are equal partners in development. So it is not a bill that is just for women, which is what I think most times they do not understand. And perhaps it's to call on our lawmakers to please read these bills most times. Read it beyond cultural or religious sensitivities, that you read it and understand the content. That this is about development, right? It's beyond just asking for women. It's about rights, it's about development, it's about the future of Nigeria for all people, men and women. And when we pass this law, we will begin to achieve those marginal gains we're hoping to achieve when it comes to economic development.
Would you say that perhaps there was failure of advocacy? I have asked this question several times before. Failure of advocacy on the part of the women and the men who support them in lobbying and mobilizing the men folk in the legislative arms of government, both at the federal and state levels, on these, both on the Joe Bill and on the other gender bills that were rejected at the last constitutional alteration exercise by the National Assembly. I asked that because I said, well, here we are, all the men who are in the National Assembly, for instance, have wives, they have mothers, they have daughters, they have cousins, they have nieces, all over. Now, would it have made much more difference if this mobilization was to have been done at the constituency level, and to tell these men to say, look, this is what we want. If you do not do this for us, don't even come back home to the constituency.
Thank you very much. Cynthia said earlier that if you have to go through the National Assembly with any bill, for the women's bill, you have to go 4 times more. I would say more than 10 times more to struggle to get your voices heard. First, I want to step back and say a big thank you to the media for the great job. And I remember, I want to commend you and the team. I remember that even at one point, you know, while we were at the gate of the National Assembly, AIT brought their studio. Both channels, Arise, you know, all television stations followed us through and have followed us even in the journey of advocacy, on this journey of advocacy. They have been there throughout. Our partners made series of advocacy visits. A lot of partners of ActionAid or YAGA or the whole partners, even from the civil society situation room and the network of individuals and also, you know, corporates, you know, to the National Assembly. The journey didn't just start. It started a long time. For these of the bills, more than 18 months of going to the National Assembly. I remember that I was on set with one of the House of Rep members. He said, I think you need to redefine your stakeholders, which are lessons anyway, more stakeholders or how you can involve the individuals in the House of Parliament more. And we thought we were doing a lot, but there is a lot to learn in terms of lobbying. But nobody can tell us that we did not advocate, we did not pay more attention to advocacy. And that was at the high point of that advocacy that even the First Lady of the country, you know, Mrs. Aisha Buhari, decided to go to the National Assembly. The same thing with the wife of the Vice President, to tell them that I respect you. This is about women's issues, and you can do this, a lot of progress. This is justice for democracy, not for just women. The media followed along. If we want to go into documentary, all the visits to the National Assembly will be ready, we'll pull them down, but maybe there is a lot more we can do. And there's a lot of lessons, even with being the presence at the National Assembly gate, you know, more lessons were learned. A lot of people held talks with us, you know, but in negotiation, for example, if people are knocking at your door, would you not open the gate to see who is at your door? When you know that the people are not violent, for 4 weeks, we were at the gate of the National Assembly because it was 10 legislative days. You know, we're occupying the assembly Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, only the days that they were sitting. And the leadership of the National Assembly hardly came out to us. They sent a few people from the House of Representatives. The Senate, you know, didn't feel it was necessary to see these women who were burning their skins with the scourging sun of Abuja. But these are mothers, grandmothers, and sisters, you know, across board. And so when we are looking at some of the reactions that is coming to us, you say, when did they start? Like you said, before we got even the policy, the national gender policy, it was a lot of work, years of work that, you know, went into having to take it to the council and then having it, you know, gazetted and so on and so forth. And so what we are talking about is, and that is why we are saying, okay, you have the gender, it's not active. Okay, can we go to the bills? And so we went to the bills, and then we brought bills. They are overworking, you know, the political leadership of this country is overworking the women to be able to achieve some of the goals that are being set already, they have accepted. And when the Constitution says we the people, who are the we the people? Are you 50%? Would you stand on the shoes of another? We are talking of inclusion of the people. And that cuts across as well, that you are looking at inclusion, you are looking at inclusion of the women, you are looking at inclusion of people with disability, we are looking at the young people of Nigeria, the elderly, you know, across board. We should be able to answer to that. And so the journey has been a long one, and I really want to commend, you know, Women Trust Fund. When the discussion started and they brought everybody, all the civil society organizations together, I said, what else can we do? We have women who are retired judges today. We have women who are retired engineers and so on and so forth. In the classrooms, the exam that is set for the class is set for the class. And women came out in many cases as top. And you say when it comes to decisions of, you know, life, when you take decisions at these levels, you are taking decisions about the lives of the people. Women are overburdened by the insecurity in this country. The conflict, they are the burden bearers. In many of the peace talks, women are not on the table. So who is deciding on their behalf? You know, so a lot is going on in this country. And I think taking, you know, you walk on the stage. When, you know, at 2 o'clock now, your program is over, we get out of here. This 2 o'clock will never come again in our lifetime. People should be reminded that they are walking on the stage at this time. That stage will not be there forever. And the instrument of power is how you are able to use it. Positively or negatively, you are writing your history.
So, Cynthia, I come back to that question. The mobilization, the advocacy appears to be only at the superstructure level. At the National Assembly, possibly in the urban centers and in the state capitals, as the case may be. If it had gone down to the grassroots, to the villages, to the local government headquarters, where we would have mobilized women to begin that advocacy, to begin to talk to their representatives at that level, even before they get to Abuja, do you think would have made some difference? Well,
possibly, but let's understand the idea behind social movements and social protests, and even demands around advocacy. If we think back of Occupy Nigeria, we did not have Occupy Nigeria protests in every constituency, but did Nigerians make a statement? Did it achieve some results when that protest held? Yes. Where were the major hearts of this protest? Abuja, Lagos, Port Harcourt, major cities. It never went down. If you think of every other movement that we've had, pro-democracy movement, we cannot say that because it's women, you want to go and have protests happening across the constituencies, across the states. Because even in idea of movement, there is representation, that you're representing a whole. That if we are women and there are women-led groups and they are he for she's standing with us, and we can mobilize to have engagement across the subnational levels, that across 36 states, not necessarily across every local government, but at the subnational level and at the national level, that if the National Assembly is the hub of democracy that represents every Nigerian, because our lawmakers are from constituencies, meaning they represent every Nigerian, that if you engage, that's the assumption that if you engage the National Assembly, you're engaging the nation. That if you're engaging the lawmakers, you're also engaging the people that they represent. And if in Nigeria, which is a melting pot, if in the cities, which are melting points of people from several constituencies, because every city is a melting pot of people from several cities, that if people at that level are engaging, that they are also engaging as representatives of the larger percentage of the society, then we can say that, yes, we have mobilized across board. The protests that happened for 4 weeks in Abuja did not just happen in Abuja. It happened across different states. And they had several groups who were meeting both religious leaders, traditional leaders to even mobilize at different levels. For the first time, you had the president even commit. That was one of the reasons the minister took this as a major, committed and asked the Minister of Women Affairs to lead on this advocacy for inclusion, because his government was committed to that. So if a president is making that statement as the father of the nation and is asking the minister to work with respective groups and National Assembly to push for gender issues, I also believe that that is Nigerians speaking through their president. So if we're being realistic, there's never been a movement in Nigeria where every citizen in every part of the country came out to engage. But we've always had a critical mass engage and demand on behalf of the people. And have we had a critical mass in this engagement for women? Yes. Has it been ongoing for so long? If we go back to the military rule, if we go back to the pro-democracy fight, women had been engaging and advocating for women's rights. So the advocacy for women's rights did not begin today. If you think about even the right to vote of women in the North, if you remember people like Hajia Gambo and how she fought and led women's movement for just the right of women to vote in the North until it became a right in the 1979 Constitution, you can imagine that as far back as then, there were demands and advocacy for women. If you think as far back as independence, so when we talk about advocacy and demands for women's rights, sometimes I feel we limit it to just what is happening now. We forget that this is an advocacy continuum. Several generations have joined the fight. It's been a long battle, and Madam Ene says something critical, that the system is giving women extra work. We're subjected to fight for democracy, to fight for national development, to fight for our rights. So for protests, for be it demands against insecurity, think of every protest we've had in Nigeria. Nigerian women are leading in those protests. So we fight for general issues, but we're also fighting for our rights. Not just, we're not asking for privileges, our right to be represented in government, our right to equality, freedom, and justice. So if you think about it, the system is making women work extra overtime across board, and every generation is fighting for the same thing. She mentioned in 1995, she was a young woman, and she had so much hope in Beijing. At this age, at this point, I'm looking at her and I'm saying, oh, if Madam Ene fought for this long, I'm worried, do I have to fight for that long? Will my daughter fight for so much long? So we need to contextualize this. And the advocacy for women's rights did not begin today. It's been a long journey. In the pre-colonial time, when About Women's Riot happened, it's been an advocacy in continuum and has happened from that era to present-day Nigeria. Now the question is, should Nigerian state, which is now independent, because before we say we had no independence, it was the colonial masters that were making determination, but it's independent now. Before we say it was the military, so it made sense that men were dominating, but now it's a democracy. So if truly democracy is about the people, and we know that the people is not a homogeneous term, it's heterogeneous, it consists of men and women. If now we are in a democracy, 23 years of democracy, and we are yet to see the people represented in government, then is that democracy, which is why the 9th Assembly had an opportunity to make a mark, and I hope they make that mark, that women had fought through colonialism, they fought through military dictatorship, they fought for democracy. They are now in a democracy which we all fought for. The women ahead of our generation fought for this democracy. Some died in the course of the fight for democracy. That now we have a democracy, and yet it is not representative. The National Assembly has that power as a hub of democracy to define our democracy as a people-driven democracy, not a male-dominated democracy. And please, let's stop putting women, giving us so much work. Women are going through a lot, and it doesn't make sense that we make women fight for basic things like fundamental human rights and the right to freedom and equality.
Maybe before you ask another question, I just want to dwell on that advocacy. I want to commend the ministry, the Federal Ministry of Women Affairs, led by Dame Pauline Tallen, Her Excellency, for her passion, for the work that she has been able to do. And rightly so, that after being given the mandate to say, go and meet other agencies and other bodies and lead the team by the president, she took it boldly. She has gone to many of the agencies. She went into, like most of the parastatals now have gender policies, including the defense. You know, defense, civil, you know, the civil corps. Is it, what do we call it now? NSCDC. Yeah. You know, they also have a national policy on gender, which was launched. The minister was there with the Minister of Interior to launch it, you know, down to the, you know, the army, all the sectors now, because of the power push. I remember going on advocacy visit with her, you know, as part of the team that went to some of these agencies as well. So they are not just sitting still. They are very anxious about letting Nigeria meet its mandate. The creation I'm having the Minister of Women Affairs is for the Ministry of Women Affairs to remind the country about her own section, what you are doing there. That's why you have the Minister of Agriculture, you have the minister, other different ministers, for them to, you have a mandate to deliver. And if you are not delivering, it is that ministry that will be able to come to you. So on advocacy, you also made a point of lobbying, you know, the parliamentarians' wives and all of that. I think we take it too far. When we say we now have the duty to go and lobby wives or political leaders, these people are employed by the Nigerian government. And who is the Nigerian government? It's Nigerians. They are employed to deliver on their TOR, their terms of reference for their being there. So are they delivering? It doesn't come cheap to the Nigerian people. Each of the politicians are paid, or the political leaders. All the members of the National Assembly, they are paid from the coffers of the budget of Nigeria. Are they doing their work? Do I have to beg you? If AIT gives you the job, you have been here doggedly working, and they pay you to do the job. One of the things that your employer will tell you is, have you delivered? And if you are not delivering, if you are not delivering, who will ask you about what the terms? It is the Nigerian people. What we are doing is about holding them to account. They are not doing us a favor. We gave them the job. If you think nobody elected you to where you are, then why not vacate the seat? Do we have to go to your wife? I give you a job, I have to go to your wife to go and mobilize you, to mobilize your daughters for you to answer to me? We are employed by other organizations. But one of the duties to Nigeria is that we pay our dues. We make sure that we pay our taxes. If you violate the tax, they come after you. So we pay the tax, we ask the questions, have you done your job? If you haven't done, one of the beautiful ways too is about mobilizing, which we are doing now, is advocating to the rural people. Agreed that there are some lacuna. We thought when we give them the message at this level, they will understand. Of course, if you don't understand, we go down to the grassroots. And we are combing now. We are going down to the grassroots to connect with our constituency, mobilizing them, because 2023 is coming. We are mobilizing that if these workers that you have employed are not doing their job, you have a way, and the way of looking at them is when you are voting, can you make a better choice? And so down to the women representation as well. We're looking at more women representation, because if we had 50-50, and we make a presentation to the Nigerian, we table something, then at least at that point, you will have 50-50 in the House. Matters of interest, you will have more people that will table the interests of women. But we don't have it now, and that's why they struggle. Well,
that brings me to the issue of representation. This is an electionary year.
Yeah.
In 2023, we will have elections into almost every office in the land. At this point in time, in fact, one of the bills that was rejected, the amendment bill that was rejected, B37, dealt with the issue of women representation, that's affirmative action, in the political party administration. Now we seem to have moved beyond that now to now representation. Nominations are ongoing. Some of the parties have said, okay, for women is free, or 50%. Some say free, some say 50% of what the men should be paying. Does that go far enough to ensuring the kind of women representation that we want to see in 2023?
This is it has its advantages. However, one of the things we've learned in previous elections is that parties are not sincere, or they are not genuine in the supposed offer of free tickets to women, because what we've seen is that free ticket has not translated to women winning primaries. Rather, they look for new ways to get women out, which is why we've struggled to have Democratic Party primaries. You have primaries that do not promote democratic principles. They are either new ways of manipulating the systems are introduced, the money back still win the day. So when you look at the political system, which was why that advocacy was important, to have women in leadership positions in parties. Why? Because decisions within parties are made by the executives of the parties. And if women are not represented there, they would not inform decisions that would favor women. Because one of the things we're pushing for in our democratic system is actually managing or reducing the influence of money. Because we've seen that free ticket has not translated to women winning. So the focus is not necessarily about free tickets or reduction of cost. The focus now, as we enter the primaries, is on the process, the methodology for each primaries. That if it's direct primaries, we want to be sure that the processes are credible and transparent, and that no individual is subjected to undue disadvantage. The same thing also it's unfortunate we have consensus. What we saw at the convention, for instance, people were stepping down in tears. They were adopting consensus candidates for party positions. And if you watch the APC convention, and now if we are projecting these next elections, if we are making some sort of assessment or analysis, there's a bit of worry that I hope parties would also not deploy the techniques of consensus and make people step down for positions that they ought to contest for within at the primaries level. So for women inclusion, we have a lot of women who are aspiring now, and we're happy to see that number. But if parties do not play by the rules, if the processes are not transparent and credible, it will affect women. And that is what you saw in the last elections. There were lots of women aspirants, but after the primaries, a lot of women were removed or excluded from the process. So it's not about free tickets. It's about genuineness to ensure that women who contest have equal access to emerge as a party candidate, and that for women who win primaries, their names are not replaced when names are submitted to INEC, or that they are not forced to step down for a male candidate, because that's what we see most times. Win primaries, they ask you to step down for another, and they make promises that are never really kept. So we need parties to actually go beyond free tickets. I'm not applauding parties for giving free tickets, because we know that that is not where the real work is. The real work is ensuring that your processes are transparent and credible, and that women aspirants have equal access to win, and that the parties actually commit to seeing women emerge. Because if parties don't want women as candidates, the women will struggle and not emerge.
Can we encourage more women to participate in partisan politics, to be members of the political parties and throw their weight around within the parties, say in the primaries process, for instance? Because it appears that at the moment, there are more men participating in the party politics as of now. And so they are put in a prime position to dictate what happens within the parties and who gets what, when, and how.
I think that's some of the things that we're having to deal with now. We're re-strategizing and also encouraging. One of the ways that we have done now is some of our partners have opened up their websites. All the women who are women aspirants, for women in politics, for example, they have a website now that all women who are contesting for positions should register. And I think they had some meetings recently. And those who are still making up their minds. And what we are finding out is that a lot of it, for example, even if you want to register a party now, you say you want a party for women, you want to register it now, it's too late by INEC guidelines. That is too late. And so what we are doing now is encouraging more of them to go into political parties. But at our meeting, we are working on building the women agency. At our meeting is non-political. When women are with the voice of one, when we are in a meeting, is one voice. But you have to go to the political parties, and there will be massive mobilization to registration. I know that there will be a lot of obstacles right now if you are mobilizing to go into political parties, because they say, what are your tendencies and so on and so forth. If we don't achieve so much in 2023, a lot would be achieved in 2027, because if you now, women would have been sufficiently, you know, would have become knowledgeable on the fact that if you find even the governorship ticket, a man is a governor, the candidate, and then deputy is a man. Don't even go there at all. But if you go to a party where they have vice versa, a woman is a candidate, then a man is a deputy, or a man is one, and then a woman is the other, and so on and so forth, so that we can produce. We should be able to produce 30 female deputies or governors and so on and so forth. A lot will happen, in 2027, because it's a matter of vote any woman you see on the ticket. We have to get to that point. If you don't see a woman, vote them down and vote the parties down. And so we are getting to that mobilization that there should be equal tutelage and also representation at the political level. All
right, let's leave it at that. Thank you so much. It's been an interesting time here. And I've had with me Cynthia Bamalo, who is the Director of Programs, Yaga Africa. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And the NLB Country Director, Action Aid Nigeria. And of course, she's been at the forefront of the campaign for gender rights, especially the recent ones at the National Assembly. I think with her and Cynthia in the forefront, the women should be gearing up for a lot more. Thank you so much, ladies, for your time.
Thank you for having us.
Well, that's our program for today. Please join us again when we bring you a fresh edition of the program. And if you need to watch this again, please go to our YouTube channels and our Facebook and other social media channels, and you can always watch this edition and every other edition before it. Until then, bye for now.